I have tracked hundreds of different KPIs across the businesses we run numbers for. Revenue ones, margin ones, sales ones, the obscure ones nobody can really pronounce. And 8 years of that has taught me one thing. Almost none of them matter. Most of a dashboard is expensive noise that makes you feel busy while the business does whatever it was already going to do. There's a short list, maybe a dozen numbers that actually tell you whether a company scales or just gets bigger and poorer. So I pulled the ones I would actually steer a business by, ranked them, and I'm going to give you the definition and the reason each one earns its place. Number one is gross margin. Gross margin is what is left from the revenue after the direct costs of actually delivering the work. And it's set as a percentage. It's revenue minus cost of a delivery divided by revenue. This is the single number that decides whether everything downstream is even possible. Now, here's the thing with gross margin. Most of the time, accountants get this wrong. Business owner gets this wrong as well, because a lot of the times the bookkeepers or accountants are really just prepping the books to be able to do a tax return. So they don't really care about gross profit, gross margin, or what the delivery costs actually are. We're looking for things like our people costs. What are the softwares that we're using that are directly related to delivering the service? It could be merchant service fees. So you send an invoice, you get paid, and Stripe takes a cut. You want to make sure that you've got all of those direct labor costs in that bucket. We don't want to have our sales and marketing team like in our cost of goods sold. We don't want to have our admins who really aren't delivering the service in our cost of goods sold items. We want to have just the people in there that do the delivery. If you're an owner and you're half in doing like work on the business and half delivering the service, technically you should split your time between the two and your salary should be split into both buckets. The way I see it is it doesn't really matter for the person, but everyone else that is doing the delivery of that product needs to be right there. Some service-based businesses, commissions may end up in cost of goods sold, or it may end up in sales and marketing. I prefer it in sales and marketing because it's going to be a greater understanding around your customer acquisition costs. So a company that we took and grew exponentially, for example, had commissions in the cost of goods sold line. It didn't really allow us to see what was happening correctly, and our customer acquisition cost was underrepresented so that we couldn't grow the company correctly. So what we did is we put it back into sales and marketing so that we could run analysis and ensure that the customer acquisition cost was true and correct. And then our cost of goods sold looked the way that it was supposed to. And so we could see that we were at 60% margins, which is kind of what we want to be shooting for in a service-based business. And we can kind of see then, okay, we've got enough money to be able to ensure that our sales and marketing engine goes correctly, and we've got enough for support staff that aren't actually directly delivering on the product that we're selling. In the 60-15-15 framework that I've developed, you're looking for that 60% margin. Below that, and usually there's not enough left to fund sales, overhead, and still pay the owner a decent salary. It is number one because it's a ceiling on the whole business. If you get this wrong, everything else downstream becomes problematic as well, because you won't have enough left over to fuel growth. You won't have enough to fuel the back of house, overhead, and those types of things, dues and subscriptions, and you'll find that your profitability gets broken up over time because scaling that will only compound the problem. You cannot out-market or outgrow a broken gross margin. You can only fix it, but a healthy gross margin can still hide a sales problem. Number two is close rate. Close rate is deals won divided by qualified opportunity. Out of the real shots you got, how many turned into clients? A low close rate is almost never a closing problem. It's usually pricing, positioning, or lead quality. And the close rate is just the place those problems show up. So we work with a company that we've helped grow very, very quickly. And sales and marketing really drives everything within this organization. They don't have a lot of overhead. Delivery is good. It was really that our close rate was the problem. So we looked at the three different things. We looked at pricing. How many of our current customers closed or did not close because of pricing? We started to ask that question to prospects, something that we were missing that made you not want to close. Was it that we didn't deliver on what marketing was saying? And we didn't say it specifically like that. We just asked the question and kind of gathered as much data as we could. What we found is that it wasn't pricing that was the problem. It was that that there was a difference between what we told people on the marketing side of things, on the ads, and what we were actually offering on the call. So there was a delta there. People were actually coming in for one thing. The sales call was positioning a different thing. So there was a gap between the two. And that was actually what was causing the prospects not to turn around and close. So once we got that fixed, our close rate went up exponentially. And so we were able to then dial that in very, very quickly. And then we could see what was going on. And then we were able to walk it in. The other thing is training. I've seen sales organizations or companies that are growing their sales arm very, very quickly. And it was really just everyone was saying different things. They needed more of a standardized system. So you can bring in A players. The A players will continue to close, but it's really hard to find those raid makers. So what we then look for is how do we build a system that allows our B players to become A players? We still potentially don't want our C players, but we want to be able to take those B players and turn them into A players. We came in, we got a CSO who could come in, we took all of the data, we put it all into AI to be able to look at what was going on, and we found that all of the people that were closing consistently were doing the same things again and again and again. So then what we were able to do is get our B players with the new script, with the new data, and then we were able to record all of those calls and see, do those specific people increase their close rate? The answer was yes. So then we took those B player transcripts and we put it into AI again, and we were able to see, okay, on each one of these that closed, these were the things that we did. We took the A players, we took the B players, we put it all together, and we were able to continue to develop the script until we actually got to a 40 to 50% close rate. We're then able to see what's going on internally, and we can continue to do that month over month. And also, we were able to see who was not following the script and watch what their close rate was to see if they were able to manage the same close rate or they were lagging behind, and then coach up those people. It's always a coaching or a positioning problem. It's generally not all that much anything else. We've got to make sure that we're offering the service that people want. What about a close rate that is too high? This is also a signal. It usually means you are priced too low and you're leaving a ton of money on the table. Close rate is the leading indicator. Your gross margin is usually the lagging, because if you're priced incorrectly, here's what happens. You've got a 60% close rate. Your margin, because you have to hire people quicker, is going to come down. So rather than being at the 60% mark like we talk about and that we're chasing every single month, we can't get there because the amount of work that a person can do is based on the amount of hours that they have in a day. So if our pricing is wrong, our margins are automatically going to come down, which then our profitability is going to come down. As you scale that, you're going to find that there's more waste because your staff, you may have A players right now or B players that are able to do a certain amount of work. When you hire C players or people that are able to do less, you see those profits come down and it adds up over time, and then it starts to shrink as you grow. I'm sure you've seen or heard of tons of companies that grow, and as they grow, they were super profitable in the beginning, and then over time, those profits start to shrink, and then they have to use debt to get themselves back out of the hole. Well, it all starts with pricing. And I've got a cybersecurity company that I work with currently where they close at 60%. Their cost of goods sold is causing profitability to depress because they need more people to service the same amount of customers as they grow. So what we are doing immediately is we go in and we start to raise their prices. Now, traditionally, if you're at 60%, you're about 200 to 300% too cheap. Everyone tells me I need my head read there, and that's fine. But what we do is we raise our prices slowly. I'm not saying and coming into a business where it's like, hey, raise your prices 300% tomorrow. That isn't going to work. Our salespeople aren't good enough yet. It's super uncomfortable. You're going to have to overcome a ton of objections because now you take it from 60% close rate, maybe to 30% close rate overnight. And so the mental game there isn't really where it needs to be. So we raise our prices 10%. We see what happens to close rate over the next 10 deals. Okay, we're at 30 to 40%. If the answer is yes, we keep it at 10% until the close rate starts to move back up again. Then we raise it another 10%. We see what happens over the next 10 deals. Does it go back down? So usually what happens is we stair step that up over time if we're already profitable, and that gives us the time we need to be able to get comfortable in our sales process and overcome the objections and get used to it. Because if you're closing 60% and then you're down to 30, again, the mental game hurts. But this is really our early warning system in a business. This is our leading leading indicator. It moves before our revenue does. We're going to see that every single time, that our close rate being higher will always move before revenue does. Number 3, and this one's one of my actual favorites. It's customer acquisition cost to lifetime value. Your customer acquisition cost is your total sales and marketing spend divided by the new customers it brought. That includes all sales costs, salaries, like dues and subscriptions. It includes everything in sales and marketing. It doesn't matter if it's a website rebuild. It doesn't matter if it's dues and subscriptions like HubSpot. Doesn't matter if it's commission. All of it goes under sales and marketing, and that's how you get to your customer acquisition cost. Lifetime value is the total gross profit, not revenue, you earn from a customer over the time they stay with. So you're working out churn, you're working out how long a person stays with you on average based on how much money you make on them over the time your average churn rate is. So if they stay with you for a year and your gross profit is $1,000, you make $12,000 off them. Lifetime value to customer acquisition cost is 1 divided by the other. Use gross profit for LTV, not revenue. Plug in revenue and your unit economics look about as twice as healthy as they really are. As a rough rule, under 1 means you are losing money on every customer you buy. 3 is healthy. And if I see 3 to 5, that is good, but it's probably that we are under investing in growth. So let's look at this from a good versus bad perspective. We have a customer come in and we make $100 and it costs us $100 to acquire that customer. We have nothing left over for general and administrative expenses and reinvestment into sales and marketing. We basically just break even. We can't grow from that position. Whereas if you have $100 as customer acquisition cost and you make $300 gross profit, we now have enough money to reinvest into sales and marketing more than what we put in, plus we have additional general and administrative costs if we so need it. If we look at those two things, we're then able to see what's going on with the business and we can scale that because the profit will always be where we need to be. If we're dollar for dollar and we just break even, it's really difficult to scale and you're going to have to put more money into it to be able to get to those higher level numbers of revenue. But then each time you reinvest into your sales and marketing engines, it's going to break even and your profitability just isn't going to be there. Whereas if you have the other way where you're making $300, you can continue to reinvest into that and your profitability will still shrink because you're putting more money into sales and marketing, but it's going to be less of a problem and it will hold steady at a certain point in the future, depending on your customer acquisition cost payback period. So it will allow you to scale and then eventually your net income will hold at one level, assuming your pricing is correct, your margins are correct, and you don't overhire and overspend in different buckets. This is the biggest predictor of whether you're going to scale the company into the ground or scale it into profitability. A hockey stick can turn into a ramp very, very quickly and you can crash out the other side if you aren't careful, and then you'll need debt to keep the company alive and you'll constantly just play this game where you can get into a reverse debt snowball because you get behind the 8 ball and then debt is the only thing keeping you alive. So we have to be careful. So just keep an eye on that specifically because that is really going to help you. It's going to move you into the right direction. Now, number 4 is CAC payback period. This one ties into the one above because we're going to be able to kind of tie some things out here. Customer acquisition cost payback period is how many months it takes for the gross profit from a new customer to pay back what you spent to acquire them. The longer this runs, the more cash you have to float to grow. And the more fragile you are if anything slows down. A long payback can sink a business that looks good on paper. If it takes 12 months to pay back how much it costs you to acquire said customer, then it's going to be a very, very long period before your sales and marketing catches up. So your sales and marketing is going to be over leveraged for 12 months before you can get it to reinvest. So if you grow that, you're going to have to use debt to get up over that hump. So you're spending $100,000 in ads right now. Say you want to go from $100,000 to $200,000. Well, you go and you take the cash out of your bank and you put it into that growth, but you're not getting the money back into the bank for 12 months. So you can look really, really good on paper, but the cash is draining out the back of the business because you have to use loans to keep the company afloat. You invest $100,000 for the next 12 months or 1.2 million, and that's how far your cash flow goes down before you start to get that cash back. So the way that I think about it is we always want to have like a 1 month to 3 month payback cycle. You put $100,000 into it and you get that cash back 3 months later, well, it will kind of march in sync unless you go from adding $100,000 to another $100,000 over the top. So we go from $100,000 in ad spend to $200,000 in ad spend to $300,000 in ad spend. If you stack it up and stair step it up like that, you're not going to actually have that cash come back into your bank fully till 9 months later. So we have to be careful on how we do our ad spend. If we put $100,000 in and we have a payback period of 3 months, we probably want to wait until that cash comes back to then add another $100,000. So we're at 200, we go to 300, we wait 3 months, then we do it again every 3 month cycle. If it's 6 months, you probably need to wait 6 months because you have to float that period, and that's going to take 6 months to be able to get your bank account back to where it was. So just be mindful that your customer acquisition cost payback period determines how quickly you can scale. So always be mindful of that and then work out how to get it in 30 days. If you can get it in 30 days, you can spend that money on a credit card so it doesn't hit your cash in your bank, and then you're able to pay it back in 30 days. It goes on the credit card again, and then you pay that back in 30 days. You can grow that exceptionally fast. You just cycle that up as quickly as possible. 30 days is really how I can take a company and I can grow it exponentially quickly because I can pay that credit card back and cycle it very, very fast. The only thing that you have to watch if you're doing that is if you have a decrease in sales in 1 month and you've got one-off sales and it's not like a monthly recurring structure. If you have $100,000 that goes in and then the next month you make 0 sales, now you have to float that $100,000 out of cash in the bank. You've got to be careful in how you structure this, but if you watch this CAC to LTV and you know that your team is going to have monthly recurring, you scale this into perpetuity and you won't have a problem. So to be clear, the customer acquisition cost payback period is the bridge between your marketing and your bank balance, and it is the number that decides how fast you can actually afford to grow. Number 5 is the no-show rate, which is super simple. The percentage of book calls or appointments where the prospect just doesn't turn up. It sits invisibly on top of your customer acquisition cost. You pay to get the book call. If a big number of booked calls never happen, you are paying to book far more calls than you actually get to have. So the real cost of every conversation that does happen climbs fast. A 50% no-show rate means you bought 2 booked calls for every single one that happens. So cost per real conversion roughly doubles. This is usually a reminder, qualification, or booking process problem, not a lead problem, which means it's a cheap to fix and the payback is immediate. It is the highest leverage number nobody puts on a dashboard, and fixing it drops your effective CAC without spending another dollar on ads. There is a couple of easy ways to get this. If you're already at 80% no-show rate, it's really hard to get above 80, and you have diminishing rates of return. So 80 is kind of the number that I use as the top level. We don't really want to push it past there because the amount of money you would spend to get that extra 20% just doesn't make sense. So a couple of the things that we have found that worked over time is when you're looking to get people on a call and your no-show rate is like 50%, you understand time to lead. Now, if you're a sales organization, you know this already. Time to lead is one of the quickest ways to get someone back on the hook. And then if you call them within 5 minutes and you start having the sales conversation within that 5-minute period, your no-show rate goes up or goes down really, really quickly because you're able to then strike while the iron is hot. You call them, you qualify, you then are able to get them to start talking with you. And then that's the first thing, is go through the qualifying process before they either get to a closer, make sure your SDRs are doing that, or you just have someone call them very, very quickly. That will get you up 10 to 15% right there. Just time to lead, strike while the iron is hot, get them really excited about the call. The next is once you've then done that, you send everyone a gift card. It's just a Starbucks gift card, basically saying, hey, I want you to be caffeinated for the call, but you do it for everyone. So in a company that I'm working with that we have 3,000 book calls a month, we send a $10 gift card. It costs us 10 times 3,000, it's 30 grand, but we had our no-show rate decrease by 15%. So we were able to close each deal that comes in on the front end is 70 grand. So it costs us 30. We make nearly 15% more booked calls or show ups, and we're able to then like have more conversations. And we were getting more closes simply by spending $10 per person to book. And so we spent 30, but we make exponentially more because I make 70 grand in the first month. So we're making an extra like $210,000 right there to do what? Spend 30. So it makes sense by just doing these extra things. Now we're working in this company to get SDRs to make calls within the first 5 minutes of them booking to get them dialed in and get them excited about the call so that we can get it even further. Because they were at a 50% rate. Now we're at 65. We're trying to get another like gain here up to that 80% mark. So if you can do that, you're doing the same amount of work. The calendar space is still being booked at capacity. You're just having 30% more conversations, which means it costs us the same amount of money and it's just going to grow top line revenue. The number of closes we have a month are going to increase. Super simple. If you're sitting there realizing you don't actually know half of these numbers for your own business, that's the whole problem. And it is the normal starting point, not a failure. The thing we run to find where a business is leaking profit is a short call. We call a leak check. It's 20 minutes. We look under the hood and we tell you where the money is actually going and roughly how much extra you are handing the IRS. You can talk to us by clicking the first link in the description of this video. It's 20 minutes and we'll be able to tell you how much money you're leaving on the table. And we only take 15 of these a month because we do them for free.